hunt for the megastick on the Isles of Scilly in Go Birdwatching.
Everything about birds is fascinating. Where do they come from? Where do they go? Some are rare, some are two a penny, some dowdy, some colourful. Some live in holes in trees, some out in the open for all to see. Why? There are a lot of questions and a lot of happy birders trying to find the answers.
Oh, 898 700 222.
This is Birdline. First, the headlines. On the Isles of Scilly, a wood thrush on St Agnes. There will be no inter-island boats today.
If there's a wood thrush on St Agnes, then there's only one place for a respectable birdwatcher to be. Hotfoot to Penzance to catch the skybuck. If you're looking for rarities, this is the place to be. But is that all there is to it? Is twitching just another version of collecting railway engine numbers?
Now, it seems that there are two approaches to this game of rarity spotting. You can regard it as a pure sport, as a form of hunting, or you can apply scientific principles and go in for ornithological analysis, for spotting trends. And if you do that, then twitching becomes the cutting edge of ornithology. And in early October, the Isles of Scilly is the only place to be, because now it's the height of the migration season on both sides of the Atlantic. 2,000 or more miles away, there are masses of birds traveling from Arctic America on their way to tropical America. And a lot of them have a flight path which takes them right along the coast. Now, if a fast-moving cyclonic weather pattern should catch them in the open Atlantic, then the jet stream will carry them off course. And a lot of them will drown. Some of them will be lucky enough to hitch a lift on board a ship, and a few of them, maybe just one or two, will find a landfall on these outpost islands on the wrong side of the ocean. Now, at this time of year in the Isles of Scilly, a vagrant, a bird rarity, is not lost for long.
There are people here who can be relied on to find the odd man out in a flock of plovers and tell the difference between a tawny pipit and a Richard's pipit up on the airfield. But the prevailing wind is blowing a gale from the open Atlantic west, and everyone is looking for American birds, not for eastern surprises. Peter Grant is one of the gurus of the twitch. Every October he'll be here hoping for rarities, but with a professional interest in spotting a trend.
Twitching is simply going to see a bird that's been reported, going to the site to see the bird, to count it on your life list, or just to go and see it.
Isn't it just another form of rather mindless train spotting, just sort of, well, ticking something off on a list?
That's the sort of criticism that twitching often attracts from non-twitchers. There are those who like to watch birds in their garden or go in for more scientific studies. But in fact, twitching it's got all sorts of depth. You can go into it at any level. I think a twitcher is the person who goes 2 gardens up the road because somebody's seen a great spotted woodpecker. I mean, that's a form of twitching in a way. at the other extremity of twitching, you've got the person who will travel from Fair Isle down here to the Scillies to see a particular rarity.
There is a possible wood thrush on Wingletang.
It has 3 flight views, has a russet cape and head. The rest of it's olive, song thrush size, and it has a white orbital. But they've just gone back to try and get it on the ground. Over.
Okay, possible wood thrush.
This is what they've been waiting for.
I could point out it's a first for Britain if it is a wood thrush. Over.
First Brain, Buccaneer, listened in on your composition. And do you want to put for St Agnes, and if so, how many?
Yes.
The CB network is highly efficient. No sooner has the magic name of a wood thrush been mentioned than there's a mighty rush to the nearest launch. And in no time, it's full of eager birders crossing from the main island of St Mary's to the off-island of St Agnes. 50 people catch the boat, 250 get left behind and dip out because the weather is deteriorating fast. When the lucky party reach the jetty at St Agnes, there's a palpable air of excitement and an urgent desire to leap ashore and make off for Wingletang, where the advance party have found the bird. For these twitchers, the suspense is almost unbearable. No wood thrush has ever been seen in the British Isles. If it's true, then it's a mega tick, a first, a blue chip addition to anyone's list. They've got to see it. And in a highly disciplined operation, they do see it.
Well, the good thing about this wood thrush is that it's pretty distinctive. It's got, as you see here, these orange upper parts, which are, in the sunlight, look really fluorescent orange as it flew by us, and the brilliant white underparts. And that last view we had when it was perched in the bush, that white eye-ring, very clear-cut and very sharp, makes it very distinctive and distinguishes it from all these other North American thrushes, which are much drabber. And the great thing is, of course, this wood thrush is the first one ever in Britain.
The bird shows itself in a couple of quick streaks. The birders are ecstatic. It's not only made their day, it's made their year. It gets immortalized in their notebooks.
I think the people who decry twitching look no further than the masses of people apparently chasing around randomly looking at birds. There's more to it than that. These people, the twitchers, we really study the birds. So you've got the identification side that filters through the system and all ends up in the latest field guide, all that new information. The record of the rarities are of great interest to any serious scientific ornithological student of range expansions, migration patterns. These oddities of the bird world, these vagrants, actually can give clues to more general patterns of migration and distribution.
So as well as being very good fun, the identification and recording of rarities can point the way to changes in the bird world. And an understanding of those changes can have a far-reaching influence on our understanding of the workings of our life support system on this planet. So what is the significance of the arrival on the British scene of a long-legged, black-winged stilt? Black-winged stilts are common birds around the Mediterranean basin. You'll see them on any lagoon in the south of France. But they also breed in marshy places along the coast of northern France. Often enough, they turn up along our own south coast in April. In 1945, 2 pairs bred. 1987 was only the second year in this century that they stayed to breed. And we can't tell yet whether this is the start of something new or yet another flash in the pan. This may be a pioneering pair establishing a trend in East Anglia, and incidentally seeing off the equally interesting Egyptian goose, which already breeds wild in these parts, but came by a different route as an introduced species. Black-winged stilts are indefatigable in defense of their young. Parrot crossbills have nested successfully in Norfolk over the last few years, heavily protected by the RSPB. And in amongst the dense reed beds, the bearded tits, which we all regarded as rather sedentary birds, are breeding like rabbits. Maybe Norfolk is too small for them. A succession of mild winters had them exploring and colonizing distant reed beds, so that even South Devon has seen scouting parties. Severe winters reduce their numbers and delay their progress. But this is the typical pattern for a species whose population is exploding, and it's the sort of behavior which makes for fascinating birdwatching. Changes in land use sometimes provide opportunities for birds which were never even on the British list. 50 years ago, little ringed plovers were extreme rarities, just occasionally stopping by on migration. Then in 1938, a pair nested at a reservoir in Tring. On the continent, they choose shingle beds in rivers. In England, they've adopted the nearest thing available, man-made gravel pits and industrial waste ground. They've flourished and been systematically documented through the years. Man-made sites of a different kind provided an opportunity for yet another continental species to get a foothold, again in the southeast. In fact, it's the only rare breeding bird in Britain which is closely associated with urban areas and industrial buildings. Black redstarts bred sporadically in small numbers on the south coast and in the London area in the 20s and 30s. But it was the bombing of London in the 40s which gave them a boost. They like a pile of rubble to nest on. By the time the bomb sites were cleared and developed, the black redstarts had achieved a population of a couple of dozen pairs, and they took to patronizing power stations and gasworks and such like installations. There's no shortage of suitable nest sites for them, and there seems no reason why they shouldn't do well, but they remain a rarity. There's a population of black redstarts that revolves around about 100 breeding pairs. Black redstarts maintain a foothold, even though it's not very strong. But red-backed shrikes bring the twitchers out on a summer afternoon because they may be on the way to extinction in Britain. 100 years ago, they were found all over the southern half. Now they're at the sharp end of a serious decline. Their distribution dwindled from the well-populated days of 1920 through the years to 1940, 1950, till by 1960 they were confined to the south. By 1971 to the southeast, and in the 80s a mere remnant, a rarity for the ticker's list. Once they enjoyed a variety of bushy habitats. Now they're restricted to dry heathland where there's a scattering of gorse and small trees. It seems likely that cooler and wetter summers have reduced the number of grasshoppers and dragonflies that they like to hunt. Some birds decline, others flourish. Back in 1953, the first appearance of the collared dove was an ornithological sensation. In the following years, birdwatchers flocked to get a glimpse of them. Yet today they've conquered the British Isles as common residents. They spread from Asia, reaching the Balkans by the 30s. They stormed Germany in the 40s and reached northern France in 52, crossed the Channel to East Anglia in 53. Once here, they found a promised land, easy living and precious little competition, and they proceeded to colonize the British Isles at a rate of 100% population increase per year. One pair in 53, something like 50,000 today. Suburbs and villages first, especially places where there were parks and large gardens with ornamental evergreens to provide shelter and nest sites, and especially where there were chicken runs and stackyards to provide grain. Today, the cooing of the collared dove is a familiar sound to all of us, from Land's End to John O'Groats. From twitcher's dream to something of a pest, in 30 years, has to be an ornithological record. Like collared doves, our native lapwings are spread over almost the whole of the country, though changes in farming practice are causing their numbers to alter slowly. But whereas lapwings are common, there may be hundreds of thousands of breeding pairs, there are pitifully few breeding pairs of red kites, struggling to hold on and heavily protected in mid-Wales. They've suffered endless persecution by man and represent an endangered species. Indeed, man's influence bears heavily on almost every bird species. Some suffer, some benefit, and around the wild coasts of Britain, fulmars have benefited. Today, there's hardly a suitable stretch of rocky coastline that isn't patrolled by the tube-nosed fulmar as it prospects for a nest site or pairs to produce a single egg on an exposed ledge. A 100 years ago, their only British breeding station was on the remote Scottish island of St Kilda. Spreading south from Iceland, fulmars exploded towards Britain from the north, so that by the end of the 1970s, every suitable stretch of coast was colonised. The increase in fulmar numbers and the expansion of its breeding range have been exhaustively studied and mapped by the network of enthusiastic birdwatchers. But along with the fact of the expansion, the question is, how have they achieved it? Maybe the whaling and then the trawling industry made it possible, providing vast quantities of offal at sea. But equally possibly, oceanographic factors are involved. It's a controversial subject. But at least fulmars arrived with us as a result of their own inclinations. Other species were brought here just to add a bit of tone to the noble landscape.
Back in the 18th century, the landed gentry developed the idea of improving their landscapes, of actually creating a beautiful view to look at from their windows. Long vistas of greenery, trees creatively placed and strategically placed to improve the view. A lake with lots of lovely water. And of course, once you've got a lake, you need a family of noble swans on it. Now, the problem with noble swans is that, of course, the neighbours have them as well. And in order to get ahead of the Joneses, they needed to find something new. And that's why they went off to find exotic species to introduce to this country. And that's how waterfowl like Canada geese and a lot of very colourful ducks found their way to this sort of scenery.
Nobody much took any notice of Canada geese for years, but Dr. David Parkin has them firmly in his sights.
Well, in the late 1950s, early 1960s, the numbers began to increase in Britain and in Nottinghamshire locally. The numbers rose from locally about 100 birds up to now about 1,800, 2,000. Nationally, they're now up to about 35,000 birds. The reasons for the increase, I think, are a combination. First of all, the change in agricultural practice, so that there's now much more winter cereal being grown, and the geese have now taken to feeding on this through the winter, and it gives them a supplementary food supply, so that they've got the security of areas of water for breeding, and they've also got the availability of food right down to the water's edge. The barley growers in this part of the country have serious problems in some of the fields from grazing, not just the actual damage to the crop by the geese wandering around and feeding, but also by the fact that you get a gradation in grazing pressure away from the water's edge, so that the whole crop becomes almost impossible to harvest because it all ripens at different times. It's a very difficult animal to control. It is available for shooting during the open season, and under the Wildlife and Countryside Act, it is possible for farmers to get licenses now to control it outside of the hunting season as well. Unfortunately, it's a pleasant bird, it's an attractive bird, the public like looking at it. In the dukeries around here at a lake like Clumber Park, they're a popular and attractive part of the environment, but a few miles away, where someone's trying to go cereal, they're not so popular. And in the autumn, when the public stop coming to feed them at one particular lake, then they move off and start damaging the crops in another area.
Canada geese are flourishing as wild geese in Britain, far from their natural home in North America. There's a duck which might follow suit. The mandarin comes from China, but does well in the home counties in suitable residences. There may be something like 5,000 mandarins at large in Britain, which may be 10 times as many as there are back home in China. The mandarin is an endangered species, yet it's doing well in this country, breeding happily where there's a secluded pond or a stream, and as long as there are some nest holes in the trees. It takes happily to nest boxes, and wherever you find it, there's an ornamental wildfowl collection not far away. It's not difficult to see why people first imported mandarins back in the late 18th century. A duck like this is bound to impress the neighbours. Mandarins bred well in captivity, but inevitably some jumped over the fence, and now it turns out that they do well in the wild. They may be in trouble back home, but their range is expanding in Britain. Just like those red-breasted geese, there'll always be individuals which find their way out into the wide world. Mandarin ducks have done it, ruddy ducks have done it. It's the speed with which the ruddy duck has colonized Britain that's so astonishing, really. It reminds you a bit of the collared dove, but there are some real differences. When the collared dove spread itself slowly and gradually right across Western Europe until it got to Britain, and it's really a sedentary species which was expanding its breeding range, whereas the ruddy duck in North America is a migratory bird and didn't want to come here in the first place anyway. It found a sympathetic landscape, and within 25 years, it has also established itself a migratory route. It's got a regular pattern. Most of them breed up in the West Midlands, but come winter, they fly south, down the Severn waterway and across Slimbridge, where they all first came from, and they winter south of Bristol. Ruddy ducks are here to stay. Perhaps there's still a question mark over the parakeet's future. Ring-necked parakeets found their way onto the bird tables of the Medway towns and the Thames Valley by way of cage bird fanciers. Imported from India and Africa, they turned out to be less amenable to cages than their owners would have liked, and it seems that some of them were shown the door, or rather let out of the window, to fend for themselves. To everyone's surprise, the first astonishing feral records of breeding parakeets were followed by yet more. Fueled by bird table offerings of fruit and seeds, they're becoming established in the wild. So what's next? Will the Twitcher's subalpine warbler be a flash in the pan, or will it be a regular customer? Yellow-browed warblers are almost regular visitors now. Will they stay? Or will the North American ring-billed gull be next to breed and become truly British? The bird world is always on the move in every sense. Charting the failures and successes is one of the ways in which amateur birdwatchers underpin the work of professionals.
For further information about bird organisations, send a large stamped-addressed envelope to Go Birding, P.O. Box 7, London W3 6XJ. And next week at 5:05...